Hey everyone, what's going on? So in this video, I'm going to talk a lot about signs, symbolism, synchronicity, and how you can understand this a little bit better by understanding what is called gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases. So if you're new to this channel, you're going to have to check out some links in the description to understand what I'm talking about and learn to apply it for yourself. And I have a video, a 15-minute video, that if you watch that video, you should be able to understand this a lot better and, practice this for yourself. You can apply it to your own life. You can apply it to the mainstream media, our sports leagues, our told history, and you're going to see how this is done all throughout history, and that we live in some type of numerical code, some type of, matrix type thing. And it might sound far-fetched, but I'm telling you, once you apply this, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. And after you start learning a lot of this, it seems that there are these odd things that start happening all the time, such as you'll be talking about something, and then out of nowhere, the TV will be talking about the exact same thing, or, just all kinds of just odd things like that. Such as the other day, my girlfriend had this weird text to me about vaccines. She was texting me about my 6-month-old son who was gonna take to the doctor to get his 6-month shots. And I didn't know what she was talking about. It was really confusing. And she thought I knew what she was talking about, but I didn't get what she was talking about. And the whole time I was thinking, vaccines and autism and whatever. And I got home, and when I sat down on the chair, I looked up at the TV, and the episode of Family Guy that was playing just so happened to be about Stewie getting vaccinated, and they weren't going to vaccinate Stewie and whatnot. And much, much more. Maybe I'll talk about that later in this video, but just some weird things that happen like that. And the birth of my son was all about bridge symbolism. And I even made a video in regards to Family Guy. The day that he was born, my friend had called me and told me congratulations and whatnot. He's the only person who called me in the hospital out of all my friends. And his name in gematria just so happens to equal the same as my son. It equals 72. And my son equals 72 front and reverse. And I sat down, I went back in the hospital room, and I sat down and I looked up at the TV, and there was an episode of Family Guy playing, and it was a girl giving birth, and they were like, "It's a boy." And I looked up the episode, and it just so happened to be the 72nd episode. And much, much more. And I made a video on that, and YouTube blocked my video worldwide, so nobody can even watch my video. And I didn't do anything bad in that video. I didn't say anything bad. All I showed was one screenshot, or maybe a couple screenshots of that TV show. But you can go on YouTube and find how many clips of Family Guy on YouTube, and I can't show a picture? It doesn't make any sense, They've been censoring me like crazy ever since I started this channel, and the things that I've been showing are something that I think they don't want people to understand. That your own life, if you understand how this works, you can understand how it must be some type of certain frequency that syncs up to the mainstream media stories, and so on. And there's been lots of weird things that have happened that I've been able to predict just by weird synchronicity things, such as I was watching the movie The Number 23, and a big thing in that movie is that what's the book called? There's something to do with the color pink. He says the color pink, and he shows gematria with that color in the movie, and then he also, Fingerling is his name, and when you look up Fingerling, you find out there's a connection to Pinky, the pinky finger. And I had this other weird synchronicity with Alex Jones and the Gematria Effect radio show. And basically, moral of the story, it led me to Pink, the singer, and then I thought Pink, the singer, would sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. And this was a month before they even announced that she was going to sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. So just odd synchronicity things. I've also talked a lot about the sports leagues, such as this year the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. It was super synced up to my grandma who died in September, and then also my uncle who died in April 17th. And my grandma lived on Eagle Street, and I documented the year before, in 2017, how the same uncle was at my grandma's house, and my sister was there. My sister just so happens to own a company called Eagle Acres, and the town that she lives in was featured in a Super Bowl commercial, because they have this giant bull statue. And then some girl from their town died, what was it, like, it was synced up by the numbers after the Super Bowl. And the last person to die where she died in this river or this stream or whatever, his name was Lyle Eagletail. And my uncle who just died, his son is the only person I know that was a Philadelphia Eagles fan in my whole life. And then the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And I had this blog post from a long time ago mentioning my uncle, my grandma, and my sister. And then my uncle and my grandma both died in connection to the Super Bowl, you know. And then my sister was in a town that was featured on a Super Bowl commercial. And she owns a company called Eagle Acres that I did not know about until just this year. So anyway, I kind of want to just explain a tiny bit there. I had an uncle in 2017 on January 14th that died, and it was really synced up to the Cubs winning the World Series in 2016. And I was following this synchronicity as well in 2016 over the summer, and I talked about how there was this big Native American theme going on in the mainstream media. In some weird way, it was connected to the town I live in, and also a town 20 minutes away, and the Omaha Indians, if you will. And I kept saying, I think it might be the Indians and the Cubs in the World Series. And on September 30th, we got a Hoboken train wreck that injured 114 people. And Hoboken's where the first ever baseball game was supposedly played, but on that same day, the Chicago Cubs tied the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it was the first tie since the year 2005 when the Chicago White Sox won the World Series. But the word tie in gematria equals 114. And the last time there was a tie, it was the Astros versus the Cincinnati Reds. 114 days before the World Series in 2005, the Astros made that World Series and lost to Chicago. And then the Cubs went on to win the World Series, and they got their 114th win of the season, and they were in their 114th season being called the Cubs. And Terry Francona, the coach of the Cleveland Indians, is now 11-4 in World Series. And then my uncle, who was a big Cubs fan, he died on January 14th, a lot like 114. And my neighbor, who's also my grandma's neighbor, we kind of live in this little, circle. I don't know how to explain it, but my grandma lives behind me, or lived behind me, and my neighbor lived to the right of me here. And the new person that moved in is a girl I graduated with, and her birthday is 11/4 even. All these 114s. And this year, it's the 114th World Series. Better yet, my uncle actually went to a Cubs game in 2005 on 8/8, and Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88 in gematria. He took his wife there for their 25th anniversary, and they went to the Cubs versus the Cincinnati Reds, which is the team that Houston tied, right? And then my uncle dies on January 14th. And Pittsburgh was also in connection because Pittsburgh Pirates equal 228. And earlier in the season, I was talking about how Aroldis Chapman got traded to the Cubs, and it was synced up to the Indians and the curse of Rocky Colavito. And Aroldis Chapman was actually born the exact same day, 2/28, like Pittsburgh Pirates, of the year 1988, the same day that Harvey Keene died, the guy who got traded for Rocky Colavito. So I knew there was this interrelated connection, and I followed all these Native American themes all year. We even got the Dakota Access Pipeline story right before the World Series began and whatnot. And the girl from the movie Divergent got arrested at the Dakota Access Pipeline. And before that, I even talked about how the only two movies I seen in the theater that year were the Allegiant movie and also this movie called The Darkness. The Darkness about the Native American Anasazi rocks. And Allegiant was about Chicago. Like, the whole movie is about Chicago. Chicago and the Indians, right? And then we got Chicago and the Indians in the World Series. And everything about Chicago was that they hadn't won in 108 years, right? And then it even went to extra innings. It started raining. And then the Cubs even had, it was the 10th inning, and they won with 8 runs, a lot like 108, and just tons of other stuff. The Great Chicago Fire that began on 10/8, 145 years ago. Chicago, Illinois equaled 145. And, if you read out 145, it equals 108. Willis Tower, Chicago, 108 stories tall. Baseball equals 108. There's 108 double stitches. Just lots and lots of 108 with the Chicago Cubs. But what I pointed out was that Rocky Colavito, the guy who cursed the Indians, was born on August 10th. 8/10, or also in other parts of the world, they write it as 10/8. And the MVP of the 1948 World Series, the last time the Indians won the World Series, was Lou Boudreau, who died on that same day, August 10th. 10/8 or 8/10. And he was the coach of the Chicago Cubs the same year that Rocky Colavito got traded on the 108th day of the year of 1960. All of these interesting connections to the number 108 synced up to the Indians' curse and also to the Cubs' curse. And there's been a lot of other things that are going on now with this. I keep seeing this number 810. So Rocky Colavito born on 8/10, and Lou Boudreau dying on 8/10. We got that story of the Indian chess boy, and his birthday just so happened to be 8/10. My uncle who died this year, and his son, who was the only Eagles fan I know, he named one of his daughters in honor of my grandma before she died. He named her Ellie, and her birthday just so happened to be August 10th, 8/10. And my Uncle Barney, who died on January 14th, in connection to the Cubs, he died 8 months and 10 days before my grandma. 8/10, yet again, This number that's synced up to the Cleveland Indians, the Chicago Cubs. Can't even remember it all off the top of my head, but let's start looking at some of these posts here, because what I noticed in some of this research is that this year we got the death of Terry Francona, the Cleveland Indians coach, and his father is who died, Tito Francona. And just right away, notice his birthday, November 4th, a lot like 114. And his son, Terry Francona, is 11-4 in World Series right now. And, it's just weird. So his dad dies, and his dad just so happened to die 8 months and 10 days before the World Series. And Rocky Colavito born at 8/10 and so on, right? And, I pointed out too, he died 74 days before the World Series, and it was all 2 months, 13 days before the World Series then, and he died on 2/13, but Rocky Colavito equals 74. So this would be 74 days before the World Series. Rocky Colavito equals 74. I'm skipping over a whole bunch of stuff, just because this video will be like 3 hours long, and I only want it to be like maybe an hour or something, but, yeah, there's so many connections here. Another big number that I've been seeing this year that is in connection to 810 is the number 624, and I have this whole video in regards to 624 and bridge symbolism, and how it's an important number, and I didn't fully grasp it, and I've just learned more and more. I found out that modern Freemasonry was founded on 624 in the year 1717, and also the word Jesuit equals 624 gematria. Two separate things, but they're really all one and the same, and they're part of the people who understand this knowledge and have been scripting our sports leagues and, ruling over us with this knowledge. But at some point in time, I stumbled upon how Rocky Colavito in Satanic Gematria equals 624. And Detroit Tigers equal 624. And the reason Detroit Tigers are important is because Rocky Colavito was traded to the Detroit Tigers. Also, when the Chicago Cubs were cursed, they were cursed playing against the Detroit Tigers. And the last time they won in 1908, before 2016, they beat the Detroit Tigers. So 624, just like Rocky Colavito. Also, Grover Cleveland died in 1908. The last time the Cubs had won the World Series, he died 108 days before the World Series began, and he died on 624. This number connected to, Cleveland, it seems. And Aroldis Chapman in Satanic Gematria equals 624. Remember, Aroldis Chapman super synced up to the Cubs winning over the Indians in the World Series. I also recently discovered that my son, who was born on January 17th this year, his birthday is 6 months and 24 days before August 10th, 810. And his birthday is also 6 months and 24 days after 624. So there's this connection to my son as well. And yeah, I should show you what's going on with Family Guy. So here's the synchronicity I had the other day in regards to the vaccine stuff. But before I mention that, I also want to point out that 624 is also significant because my grandma died 6 months, 24 days before my uncle, who died in April this year. And my uncle died 6 months and 24 days before my birthday. It's this just super big, important number that I'm supposed to see. 624. And it's also synced up to Pope Francis, and it's synced up to Prince Charles and whatnot. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. But anyway, so like I said, I was at work and my girlfriend texted me about Zamian getting his vaccines, and I said, she just said he's getting his vaccines, and I was like, yeah, I don't get it. I said when, and then she said 1, and I said it was 3 something in the afternoon. I was like 1. I was like, what, tomorrow or what? I don't know what you're talking about. It was this confusing message, and then I finally figured out she meant tomorrow, or the next day or whatever. But the whole time, I had a couple more hours at work, and the whole time I was thinking about vaccines and autism and whatnot. And I documented about this before with him, in regards to autism, and I'm pretty sure he's not autistic. At the time, he just wouldn't look at me. Now he looks at me all the time. He's crazy. But anyway, what was interesting is that then I came home and I sat down and I started watching the TV, and the episode that was on of Family Guy was called Hot Shots, and it was about Stewie not getting vaccinated. And I thought, I even looked at my girlfriend and I said, I know you hate this, but don't you find that odd that I was so confused about the vaccines today, just a few hours ago or whatever it is. And the first thing I sit down and watch on the TV is about Stewie not getting vaccinated. And then she's just like, kind of like, oh God, he's going to talk about this all day, you know, because she hates it when I talk about this. And I kind of was like, I could tell like she didn't want me to keep talking about it. So I told her a few more things. I told her, well, you know, Zamian's birth was synced up to Family Guy, and YouTube even blocked my video on it worldwide. And he was synced up to bridge symbolism. And I was like, you know, I talked about how it was connected to Philadelphia being in the Super Bowl. And then after, you know, the Super Bowl, we got the bridge collapse in Miami, even the pedestrian bridge collapse. And I told her all this stuff about bridges. And later on in the episode, at the climax of the episode, Stewie goes down to this bridge and he hangs from underneath it, and then this train comes underneath it and he falls, and Sean Penn comes out of nowhere and parachutes and saves Stewie. Sean Penn. And they even make a joke about how he was the gay guy in San Francisco, and they're talking about Harvey Milk, who I have covered extensively at videos. Harvey Milk, the gay mayor who got killed by Dan White, and Dan White used the Twinkie defense, right? And I talked about that in regards to Pittsburgh, and how Pittsburgh was the city of bridges. But just think about San Francisco with it, too. The Golden Gate Bridge, another big piece that I've been talking about a lot. Golden Gate Bridge in gematria even equals 810. You know, anything that equals 135, it also equals 810. So 810. Harvey Milk equals 124. Family Guy equals 124. This episode's called Hot Shots. Hot Shots equal 124. My son was actually born at 1:24 in the afternoon on January 17th, and his actual due date was 1:24. So, you know, how interesting I have this synchronicity with Family Guy. And Family Guy equals 124. My son was born at 1:24, and his actual due date is 1/24. And the reason that he's connected to bridges is because the word bridge equals 117. And he was born on January 17th. And my grandma had just died 1 month and 17 days before my birthday. My girlfriend, her name equals 117 in gematria, and then she has my son, or our son, on January 17th. And then, of course, that means that his birthday, 9 months and 24 days before my birthday, and my grandma died on 9/24. Which, by the way, is also the same day that Nicholas Cruz, the Valentine's Day shooter, was born, supposedly. And, you know, the Eagle stuff, super synced up to the Stoneman Douglas Eagles. Have a video on that as well, how it's connected to my life. I also pointed out that the day of the synchronicity was the 197th day of the year. The 45th prime is 197. The word bridge also equals 45. So what are the odds, you know? And then I tell my girlfriend about that, and I go, look at that. Look at that. There's a freaking... It ends with a bridge scene. You know, the climax of the show is about a bridge. And she's just like, she still just like doesn't care, you know? That's how most people on this world are. They don't care, and they don't pay attention to these signs and symbolism. Or if they do, they just don't care. Just, I don't know. I don't understand it. I know she knows that what I'm talking about, she just doesn't want to waste her life trying to figure it out, I guess, you know? And so, I don't feel like I'm wasting my life trying to figure this out. I've always wanted to know the truth of this world, you know? So it's just, I don't waste my whole day doing this. I think about it all day long, and I don't say a lot of things to people when I talk to them. But, you know, there's not much else that's important to me anymore. After you see this and you see it at the extent that I'm talking about, I mean, you know, this is like life-changing, life-saving information if we can figure out how to, you know, figure out what it all means, how to apply it for ourselves, and how to make it for the greater good of the world, you know. So... it seems to me that's, you know, that's what I want to do. just make the world better. There's so many bad things in the world, so that's why I'm so obsessed with doing this over and over. And that's why I make these videos. You know, I haven't been making as many as I used to. I used to pound them out all the time, but I don't have enough time a lot of times anymore. I've been really exhausted lately too. I stay awake all night long when I work at like 9 in the morning, you know, so, but it's kind of like, what's the point of making these videos to get 20 likes and, you know, a few hundred views over and over and over? So it's like, I don't know. But there is a point, you know. The point is that other people are out there who want to know more and want to understand this, and eventually other people might stumble upon all of these videos and, you know, figure this out. So, anyway, I also pointed out my son was really connected to the Jesuits as well. His name equals 84, and it also equals 321. He was born 3 months, 21 days after the Jesuit anniversary, and the word Jesuit equals 84. So, it's interesting if you go from his birthday to the, to the Jesuit anniversary, it's 8 months and 10 days, you know. In regards to 114, my dad has, his name equals 192, and so does my son's in the frontward way. And my mom's name equals 192, and just not her full name, but her just Ann Barrett, I believe it is, equals 192. And my dad was born on April 4th, which in most parts of the world they read it as 11/4, like 114. And my dad's name in reverse reduced equals 114. And in satanic, his name equals 927, like the Jesuit anniversary. So, just interesting stuff. But, I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh, the whole point was that, you know, he's born 8 months and 10 days before the Jesuit anniversary as well. And there was also a Rocky scene in that episode, the 72nd episode of Family Guy. I talked about Rocky and the 70, well, I didn't talk about it at the time, but I learned from Zenith of the Alpha that there was the 72 Rocky steps, and Rocky equals 72, and a bunch more was 72, just like my son's name equaled 72 frontwards and back. And my friend called me, you know, whose name equals 72, that I saw the 72nd episode of Family Guy. I was also thinking about how Harvey seemed to be important as well. Harvey Keene was the guy who cursed Rocky Colavito. Last year, Hurricane Harvey was a big deal in regards to the World Series, and the Astros going to the World Series, and Matt Harvey being the first pitcher to pitch against Houston just after Hurricane Harvey in Houston, right? Matt Harvey, we had Steve Harvey at the Mayweather fight, and Matt Harvey pitched, 52 days before the World Series, and the word flood equals 52, and Harvey equals 52, and, you know, it's even had the connections to Super Bowl 52 that was later on in the year, but, you know, Harvey Keene, who died on the same day Aroldis Chapman was born, and also was the reason of the curse of Rocky Colavito. I also pointed out that the day before equals 114, something I talked about a long time ago, and it's the 114th World Series, but in regards to Harvey Milk, right, that's what I was talking about, Harvey, the new London mayor, the San Francisco mayor, London Breed, her birthday is August 11th, so the day before would be August 10th. So just something interesting. The number 17 has been really, really, really important this year as well, especially with the XXX Tentacion or whatever, and Stoneman Douglas, and the Cubs playing in Miami, and the game that went 17 innings. That game just so happened to be 6 months and 24 days before the World Series this year as well. You know, that 17 game, but my son born on the 17th day of the year. So Marjorie Stoneman Douglas died 1 month and 7 days before her birthday at the age of 108. And she died on 14/5, remember? Chicago, Illinois equals 145. The Great Chicago Fire was 145 years before they won in 2016. And if you read it, whatever. But 14/5, also the day Israel declared its independence in the year 1948, 145 days before the World Series that the Cleveland Indians won, the last World Series that they've won, you know, just after World War and whatnot. I also pointed out my son, his full name is Satanic equals 857, the 148th prime number. Cleveland Indians equal 148, Donald J. Trump 148. That Miami bridge collapse was 148 days before August 10th, 810. You know, lots of stuff in regards to North Korea as well. And Harry S. Truman equals 148. Of course, anything that equals 148 also equals 888, which is another big number. We had the Maryland newspaper shooting, and that was at 888 Bestgate and whatnot. And Curse of the Billy Goat equals 888 in Satanic Gematria. And that's why Michael Jordan was so important. I was talking about Michael Jordan in 2016 because he played baseball under Terry Francona, who was the coach of the Indians, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Michael Jeffrey Jordan equals 888 in Satanic Gematria. But in one of my recent posts, I mentioned how the word Augustus equals 888 in Gematria. Augustus. And then we just got that Chicago shooting with the guy named, what was it, like, whatever, Harith? Was it Harith Augustus? Harith equals 206, just like Chicago Cubs. And then his last name was Augustus, of all names. And Augustus was the guy who founded the Roman Empire and was born on 9/23, that important date to Pope Francis. Remember, Pope Francis is also important to the number 624. He's also the first Jesuit Pope. Jesuit equals 624. He's doing the hidden hand pose before he was the Pope and whatnot. Hidden hand pose is a Freemasonic pose. Freemasonry founded on 624. So the Cubs or the Indians aren't in the World Series this year, which I really feel like that's what it's showing me again. The Cubs, the Indians may be beating the Cubs in the World Series this year. There's some other things that are connected to some other teams, but there's a lot of stuff going on with the Indians and the Cubs, so could be one or the other or completely wrong, you know. And I don't really care. I'm trying to figure out what is truly going on with this code and what is going on in this world. I don't really give a crap about, you know, who wins. Just, you know, it always works out by the numbers, and I want to just figure out how this works and what the purpose of it is. Maybe I'm just supposed to learn something about my own life in regards to this because of it, you know, if that makes any sense. So, anyway, well, I'll skip over that, I guess, but if you write out 810, it equals 72 as well. Also 81 like bridge, and 162 like baseball and Major League Baseball and a bunch of other stuff. But in this episode, they also make fun of John Goodman for being fat, which is interesting. If you've been following me, talked about the death of Ralphie May and how Ralphie May might die in the next year. And then Ralphie May did die in that next year, and he died in Las Vegas just after the Las Vegas shooting, just after my grandma died, just after this guy from The Price is Right reached out to me, you know, a day before the Las Vegas shooting. He's from Las Vegas. So, just some weird stuff, but the whole thing in the beginning, it was about the number 124, And that was the big number that I was talking about fat comedians. So, and Ralphie May died big time by the number 124. Fat comedian equals 206, like Chicago Cubs though. And if you do fat comedians, it equals 214, reminding us of Valentine's Day. 214. In 2015, I made a ton of videos about how Michael Jordan was important to Philadelphia and also Valentine's Day as well. And, you know, he even retired on 10/6. Philadelphia was originally the capital of the country Jordan until the year 106 AD, a lot like 10/6. And then it was later destroyed by earthquakes. And I've been talking about an East Coast earthquake, something to do with Philadelphia. We even got the one in Delaware last year that was, what was it, a 4.1, and in November, and that was a big piece to why I really thought the Eagles would most likely be in the Super Bowl. I thought maybe they were going to play the Steelers, you know, but it was the Eagles made the Super Bowl after that 4.1 earthquake that was felt there, and Super Bowl equals 41, and they scored 41 points when they beat the Patriots. So anyway, moving on here, just kind of finish up the video a bit. I had some more synchronicity earlier when I was looking up Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, right when I got off work with Family Guy. I'm going to make a separate video on this, but, you know, I get home from work, I sit down, and I start looking into the Trump-Putin thing because somebody had left a comment last night after I made the video about why I didn't cover that, and it's like I have covered a ton of stuff about this. And I wanted to cover it anyway, so I come home and I start looking it up, and I look up at the TV, and I see it's the episode where Peter challenges Putin to a boxing match or whatever. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me, you know. So, I'm gonna, like I said, I'll make a separate video on that, but just, it was season 16, episode 7, and that summit just so happened to be on the date of 16/7, you know. The 39th prime in Finland, where it was, equals 39. 39 days before the president of Finland's birthday. Anyway, well, actually, I gotta find the post about drowning pool here. I had this post about, just the other day, about this XXX rapper's cousin's dying, and I talked about how his cousin drowned in the pool, and I thought it was interesting because on July 2nd, for whatever reason, I thought of the band Drowning Pool at work. Just out of nowhere. I haven't listened to this band in forever. I don't know what it was that sparked my brain to look up Drowning Pool. And I was like, man, I haven't listened to that band forever. And I knew there was something significant about me wanting to listen to this band, like, really bad. It just, like, wouldn't leave my brain. So I took a screenshot of it on my phone even. And, you know, right there, Drowning Pool, July 2nd, 7-2. Right? That number connected to my son. And this was on 7-2. And Drowning Pool, I noticed Drowning Pool at gematria equals 72. And their lead singer died on tour at Ozfest, that equals 117, like the date my son was born, and Bridge, and his name also equals 72. And I randomly think of this on the 72nd, or 7/2. What I did point out in when I took this screenshot up here at work, you can't really see, I didn't take the bigger picture, but I pointed out on there so I wouldn't forget that the singer, his name equaled 206, like Chicago Cubs, and Drowning Pool equals 162 and 162 in reverse. You know, MLB 162, Major League. Baseball, the word baseball equals 162, 162 regular season games. So I thought, you know, how interesting. And I forgot to blog about it. And then when this girl drowned in the pool, it just reminded me to think about it or whatever. And also, oddly enough, I remember the day that guy died, because I didn't really know who he was. I was in high school, and my friend had Yahoo messaged me and said, Dave Williams died. And I was like, oh man, I thought it was some guy from town because I know a guy named Dan Williams. I thought maybe it was one of his brothers I didn't know or something. And I didn't get it. And then I later found out it was the guy from Drowning Pool. But what's interesting about it, the person who keeps saying text, but his Yahoo messengered me. It could have been ICQ even, actually. I remember that the person who told me it might have been ICQ, that's even older than Yahoo Messenger, but where you got a number of all things, but it's my Cuban friend who I've documented about just recently, who I rarely talk to, but his name equals 206, and also 62, and 7-2 is 62 days before his birthday. Also, I pointed out that Dave Williams on his Wikipedia talks about how he got his nickname Stage from Dimebag Darrell. And then we also just had the death of Dimebag Darrell's brother Vinnie Paul on the 173rd day of the year. And what I was referring to on that is all of this XXX stuff. His niece who drowned in the pool, or his cousin who drowned in the pool, she drowned on the day that leaves 173 days in the year, and his name equaled 173, and they released this Ghostbusters song with this trippy red guy. They both equal 173, and he even died on this guy's birthday. And he released his 17 album 173 days before Valentine's. So there's some interrelated things going on here. And the reason I told you about the drowning pool stuff here is because just a little bit ago, I got on YouTube, and the first video that it told me to watch was Chigozie Truth's video about drowning pool. He just made this video on July 16th. Somebody had asked him to look into it. Also, Jeff Young, the former Megadeth guy and the Music Without Boundaries guy, had told him to look into it. And, I was just like, what are the odds that he's doing this video about drowning pool after I have this synchronicity with drowning pool? And we also had the death of that hockey player, Ray Emery, who supposedly drowned in a pool. And I typed in Chigozie Truth at gematria, and I found out that equals 624. What are the odds? 624. Yet again, something I'm supposed to see. And let's see here. I think I explained all that. He kept talking about Jeff Young asking him to, that was his friend or something. And I noticed Jeff Young's birthday is March 31st, which is 6 months, 24 days before the World Series this year. And also the day that the Cubs went to 17 innings, that big tribute to Stoneman Douglas and whatnot, against Miami, that synced up to the rapper XXX, whose cousin drowned in the pool. Also, that day is 6 months and 24 days before the World Series this year. So I thought that was interesting, and what Chigozie was talking about too was the date of Dave Williams dying, 14/8. I don't know if he talked about this completely, but Cleveland Indians equal 148, and he died on 14/8. He also died 66 days, or at the end date, 67 days before the Angels won the World Series in 2002. Angels equals 624. The word drowning equals 624. David Williams, 66. Dave Williams, 67. So he's synced up to the World Series that year. And it was the Angels, and a long time ago I documented a lot about the angel Gabriel, and what was seemingly the angel Gabriel helping me out with all of this synchronicity and trying to help me understand it, right? Gabriel equals 810. So, I know it's a lot for anyone new to take in, and I don't know. I'm sure there's some people who can understand what I'm talking about. And you need to come to my blog and follow my blog every day to understand what I am talking about, because sometimes it just gets to be too much and I don't know how to explain it and organize it like right now. But, you know, I don't know. It's just so weird. So strange that randomly this is the first video. He's talking about drowning pool, something I just had synchronicity with, and then his name equals 624. Can't be a coincidence. The same, on 624 this year, the Indians played the Detroit Tigers as well. The team that they're kind of cursed by, the team that the Cubs were cursed by. And the beginning of the season this year, Detroit played Pittsburgh, right? The team that the Cubs had that connection to 114 with and tied. And the game got postponed. And also that same day, the Cincinnati Reds, who were in the last tie since the Cubs in Pittsburgh, their game got postponed. And Cleveland played Seattle, who's in the 206 area code. And Seattle, after 9/11, when they got upset by the New York Yankees, which also reminds me of Aroldis Chapman, but when they got upset, they had tied the regular season record wins of 116 with the Chicago Cubs. So, you know, Chicago Cubs 206, Seattle in the 206 area code. There's a lot going on with it. I did talk about the Boston Red Sox had some interesting stuff with them as well. Of course, they were the team that the Indians defeated in a one-game playoff to go on to win the 1948 World Series. They beat the Boston Braves, and when they beat the Red Sox, they ruined an all-Boston World Series. But, oh, let me find it here. The Boston Red Sox became the Boston Red Sox the same year the Cubs had won the World Series, 1908. And the guy who named them, he was born on January 14th. If I can find it here, we'll look. This guy right here, John Taylor, January 14th, owned the Boston Red Sox. That's where we get the Red Sox name. In 1908, the last time the Cubs had won the World Series. And the reason I pointed that out was because on July 3rd, which was 112 days before the World Series this year, and I know it's the 114th, but with all this Indians-Cubs stuff, it was the 112th World Series, and 11/2, and, 112 days for the 112th World Series. The Cleveland Indians beat the Detroit Tigers 1-12. And now this year, 112 days before the World Series, the Cubs started a series against the Detroit Tigers. Right? Against Detroit. And what I pointed out was that on the same day, Boston won 11-4. So possibly it's all synced up for Boston. Boston was the team who won after, right before World War I came to an end and whatnot. And they won that on 9/11. All that 9/11 symbolism. And then the guy who names them, he was born on January 14th, a lot like 114. So, I don't know. There's some interesting stuff going on. See what else I put in this post. Yeah, see, I talked about all these 888s here. So, I don't know. We'll leave the video there. I'm going to make this other video, and then I really have to go to bed. But, hopefully it makes sense. It is a lot to take in. I'm not even that worried about it, because eventually it makes a lot more sense, farther down the road, and I can explain it a lot easier farther down the road. So, takes like the super memory to remember so much of this stuff. I can always see all these patterns, but thankfully I write them down because I don't know how like Zach can memorize some of this stuff so much all of the time. Like I'm getting better and better at memorizing a lot of stuff, but holy cow, it's a lot to take in, and he doesn't necessarily go as this deep either, so he keeps it simple. It says Freemasonry, blah blah blah, But I'm telling you, if you go deeper, you'll figure out that your life is connected to the mainstream media stories as well, because, this stems back to ancient knowledge that somehow this, whatever you believe God is, within Kabbalah, God, supposedly created the world by merging the letter with the number. God doesn't necessarily have to be some guy sitting up in the clouds watching over us. It could just literally be this system that we all live in. You know what I mean? It could be a lot of different things. So, and it's obvious we live in this system. So, proved it over and over again. But done rambling. Have a good one, and we'll see what happens. Peace.